Hey, I'm Christina Rhea, and welcome to Breaking Out of Breaking In, a practical filmmaking podcast about taking your creative career into your own hands and making great work that gets seen without playing the Hollywood game.
Or at least while changing the rules. Hi, I'm Brie Castellini, your other co-host, and today we're breaking down directing for TV movies with guest Prarthana Mohan. Before we dive in, though, remember that we release bonus content for each episode over on patreon.com/breakingoutpod if you want to support us and get yourself even more info and resources. But enough about that. Prarthana, please introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hey, thank you guys. Hi, Christina. Hi, Brie. And hi, anyone who's listening. My name is Prarthana Mohan. I am a writer-director, originally from the south of India, Chennai, our fourth largest city in India. And I came to the US in 2006 to go to grad school. I went to Chapman, and I've been out here fighting the good fight ever since. I have since school directed 3 features, a couple of shorts, written some projects, and I also have a full-time day job as at a film school where I'm a administrator at a film school.
New York Film Academy, right?
That is right. Yes. So that's a little bit about myself.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. So this is for our For Hire series, as everyone knows. I think this is the first episode of our For Hire series. We're talking to a variety of people who work for hire in a variety of positions in Hollywood. And in your case, we wanted to talk about directing features and specifically directing for TV features. So we wanted to talk to you because obviously you moved from indie to traditional in a way that I think a lot of our listeners and certainly Christina and I want to follow in the footsteps of. So if you could talk to us a little bit about your journey from your feature, The Miseducation of Bindu, and moving from that to for hire work in Hollywood, that would be amazing. Can you talk us through like the timeline for that? How did that come about? How did you go from indie to mainstream in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is the goal, I think, for all directors, writers, whatever area of specialty you're in. You know, you want to translate your skills from making content and movies and projects for yourself and then getting paid to do it, which strangely enough is really hard as a director. Mm-hmm. You know, and not strange, it's just very hard. It shouldn't be as hard as it really is. So I directed The Miseducation of Bindu and co-wrote it with Kay Tuxford, who's amazing, who was a friend of mine from grad school. And we actually crowdfunded part of the film's budget on Seed and Spark, and that's how I got to know Christina, who was a great resource for us at the time. And for, you know, as a director, I've been saying this ever since, the best way to really get your foot in the door, especially if you want to start off as like made for TV movies, you have to make your first feature. That's really huge. I would say that it really changed things for me after that. Of course, it's not just that. You can have talent and work your butt off, but you also have to be at the right place at the right time. I mean, every single person's career in this industry has some level of that, you know, or it's like nepotism, right? It's one or the other,
right. Sure.
Or it's all of it combined. And for me, you know, having come from India, I'm the only person in my family that lives in the US. I really didn't have any connections in the industry. I didn't really know anybody. So I really kind of had to figure it out on my own. And because I didn't have family, I didn't have the opportunity to like couch surf or like, you know, hang out, live with parents until I got on my feet. Like, I just had to find a job. I was an international student. I graduated when the markets crashed. So the first crazy thing that happened. And now, of course, we have coronavirus, is a whole other situation. But that was the year I graduated. I graduated from film school and like everything crashed and no one was hiring anybody. And that was the time that, you know, I decided with Kay that we would make the short that we had done in grad school, which did really well in festivals, into a feature. You know, we were like, hey, there's no high school movies about young like girls, let's go do that, you know. And it did well. It was a semifinals and Nichols and all kinds of things happened with it. But again, not knowing how the industry works and not real, you know, in film school, the real focus is you're taught how to make stuff, but how to get to make it and what to do with it afterwards is like a huge gap. You know, like they just don't teach you that stuff, you know, because the model is still built on like, you're going to finish film school and then you're going to just be plucked out from, you know, anonymity and then become this huge filmmaker. Like that's happened to very few people that I went to school with And those few people were like exceptional, or, I don't know what their background was, but it happens. It happens, but it doesn't happen to everybody, and even while we made the Miseducation of Bindu, like we really knew how to write scripts. And then the minute we actually figured out the financing and all of that, and the first day on set, we knew how to make it. That was not a problem. The movie got made. It's, it's decent. People like it. It did well.
I liked it.
All that. Thank you. Thanks, Christina. All that kind of stuff. But once we made it, it was, again, what do you do with this? None of us really know the distribution landscape. And we also graduated in a time when Netflix was just an idea, it had just started. Sure. Mm-hmm. It was still like heavily DVD, sort of format. Streamers were barely a thing. And, we were not really being taught like what was going to happen. Everything was still in like a speculative phase. So a lot of it we had to just figure out on our own, which, whatever. I guess that's how it goes, So yeah, so for after that, so backtracking a little bit, we wrote The Miseducation of Bindu, and then Phoenix Park had their Hometown Heroes competition sort of lab-like thing that they did. And we were one of the two grand prize winners for the year, the first iteration of the contest. And we got to have the Duplass brothers executive produce, but essentially they came on as mentors for us. And that was a game changer because, again, having gone to film school, we really understood the value that they would bring to us. And it was not money. Like, that's not what we wanted. We wanted, one, their name on our project, which already opens up so many doors, sure, but also just their expertise, and they really are so good at making movies that are really good, but also not breaking the bank, and they really came in. It was really Mark Duplass. We didn't really get to communicate a lot with Jay Duplass, but it was really Mark Duplass, and he was really sort of instrumental also in us making the film a one-day movie, which was not originally the script. It was a much more longer film, spread over the better part of a semester, more development of like relationships. All of that had to get really condensed and try to find the best way to tell the story and things like that. So all of that was fascinating. It was like going to school again. And it was pretty wild experience to get to make it. And it all started with a tweet. We were driving to work and I saw the tweet and I texted Kate and Ed, who is my husband, but also came in as the producer because he was sick of seeing us waiting to make this movie. He was just like, whatever, let's just do it. And we were all just like, shall we do this? And that's how it started. It started one day over some texts in a car. And then a year from then, we were in Indiana filming the movie. And we learned everything, like how to raise money, how to crowdfund, which is hands down the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I have a 5-year-old and I still would say this is harder. And, I think it really taught us a lot of things about what it really takes to make a film. And then after we made the movie, really a lot of my other projects have come from that. Was Mar Vista bought The Miseducation of Bindu. And Mar Vista is basically like a mini studio. They put out, I think, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say it's like upwards of 200 movies a year. When they bought The Miseducation of Bindu, they had a movie soon thereafter they were looking for a director. And it was supposed to go into production at the start of the pandemic. And then it got, obviously, the world shut down.
Sure.
And then they tried to make it go a couple of times. And the original director had to drop out. And they were like, hey, we have a movie. We need a director. You want to direct this? And I was like, you're going to hire me to direct something? Yes, I don't care what it is. Let's do this, And they were like, it's a medical drama. I was like, a genre of filmmaking I know nothing about. Let's do that, So they sent me a script. And then about 3 weeks later, I was in Arkansas and I was shooting that movie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was so quick. So I read the script so fast because they had already casted and done some work previously. So I inherited the cast, and the director that was put in place before me, who bowed out of the project, had done some really great, made some really great choices. So in many ways, like, I didn't inherit any kind of disaster or anything. Like, she did a wonderful job. So, the casting that she had, that they had gone through, all of that was pretty great. I had to make some choices that were more locally based. But yeah, that really was very interesting. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do that was, one, it was a genre I knew nothing about. Mm-hmm. It was drama, straight, like tearjerker. Like, that is not my speed. Like, I like funny, like that's my jam. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And I knew nobody, like I didn't know a soul, which was also something very important for me because I've worked with the same people. And I also wanted to be like, can I just be thrown into a situation? Am I going to fail or am I going to make it happen?
Right.
And basically all the cards were stacked against me. It was COVID, peak COVID. It was right before a US election. I was in Arkansas. Knew nobody. It was just wild. I was just like, what am I doing? It was a 98-page script and we had 12 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just like, I really started to see, I was like, okay, here are like 80 things I can't do because of COVID, restrictions, budget, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we had to build a hospital, all kinds of stuff. Right. And in some ways it really felt like going back to film school, right? Like where they give you your box and they're like, go make something, right? And that was very challenging to me and very interesting. And weirdly enough, in spite of it being as hard as it was such a wonderful welcome break from having been stuck indoors for like, the last several months and worrying about like taking a deep breath,
I bet.
It was just like amazing to like be creative and do something that I never had the opportunity to do in a way like that. I've always like nurtured the project for years and cried and begged and wept and everything to bring it to life. And here I was just like pick, drop, direct, out, and I was like, what is this? This is fabulous. Sign me up one more time, and it was just like, you mean that's all? Like, I don't have to worry about, I can just tell you what I want and then you'll either tell me if I can have it or no. And if it's yes, you'll figure it out. I don't have to do nothing. Sweet. So that was amazing. Like, that was really, really awesome. But it was hard, it wasn't easy. There's challenges working with people that you don't know and trying to communicate and get people on the same page. Everybody there has worked on the same thing a million times and they have their own thoughts and feelings about working with new people or working with female directors or whatever the case might be. And really, you don't really have a lot of runway to like get everybody on, like you just need to get in there and get the job done and get everybody on the same page like that, So I wanted to see if I can do that. And it wasn't terrible. It was nice enough that I was more than happy to do it again, in spite of like the conditions being a little crazy.
Sure.
So that happened. Mar Vista was very happy with it. That ended up on Lifetime, and it was like Lifetime's movie of the month or something like that, which I was like, "Wow, this is awesome!"
That's cool.
And it was really funny because I think Lifetime movies have like a really big fan club, like on Twitter, that like tweet out all their like live tweet the movies, which I didn't even know, which is so funny and so awesome to see them. They're like, no, don't do it. Don't go here. Don't open the door, whatever it was. So that was fun. That was like a cool little experience. And then Mar Vista again had this other Christmas movie that they offered me. I want to say just as this one ended. So the March of last year.
Okay.
March
2021.
2021. I was like, what year is it? And again, they're like, we have a Christmas movie. It's bigger budget. We have different ideas with it, not TV. Are you interested? I was like, heck yeah, I'm interested. Also, but did you say Christmas movie? I was like, how did you think of me for a Christmas movie? But then I read it and I was like, okay, this is an R-rated Christmas movie. Sign me up. Not that there's anything wrong with Christmas movies. They're fantastic and wholesome and wonderful, but I don't know if I'm that person, But this was very funny. And, again, I read the script and then 3 or 4 weeks later, I was in Chicago for prep. Like, that's how fast it goes. And I worked with an amazing production crew in Chicago. Again, they were like a family, right? They do everything together. And then like, here's this like random woman showing up. But it's the same thing, like getting everybody on board and, making sure, it all, and those guys are all horror people. And they were like, oh, comedy, So it's like, it's going to be fun, guys. Come on, let's do this, But it was really fun and much harder movie, much bigger. We had 11 locations, bigger talent, more budget, but again, never what you need, right? It's never enough, So again, being really creative about how to get the movie done, again, 16 days, which is crazy. And that movie again, it got picked up by Amazon and Lionsgate. So that again opened up more doors.
Really quickly, before we dig into the specifics of these projects and moving from indie to them, how did you originally get connected to Mar Vista? Was it like, did they find you through a festival? Did you submit to them? Did somebody like recommend you or introduce you? How did you initially like connect with them to get distribution?
That is such a good question. So I'm repped at APA.
Okay.
And again, that came through the Miseducation of Bindu.
When did that happen? Okay.
I was like, I'm never getting rep. Like, I wasn't even attempting to find representation. Like, that never was going to happen. But really, again, being at the right place at the right time, my husband's coworker, this is such a random story, but this is how it goes, right? It's so strange. My husband's coworker's brother is an agent at APA. And so my husband's coworker happened to be hanging out with his brother and mentioned the miseducation of Bindu as like, hey, my coworker's wife is doing this. And he was like, that sounds cool. I want to meet her. And then that's how I met him. And they really enjoyed meeting me. But then they were like, okay, send us your script. And then they read the script and they're like, okay, you can write. And your ideas were good. And we like what you had to say. I think we're interested. And I was like, what? Like, is that...
Was this before you got into production? Was this after it was wrapped?
I think it was actually after we had finished production of the movie. So they got to see what I did and all of that. So they're like, okay, they were like, we met you and then your work backed it up. So yeah, we want to represent you. And I was like, for real? That's cool. And that was like a couple of years ago, right? So that happened. Sure. And obviously, like, after being repped by them, that also helps because they put me up for projects, a lot of which I've never gotten, that are big projects, like that I'm in the room with some pretty big time execs at like Netflix or like Paramount or wherever. And I get pretty far up, like but I haven't landed some of them yet.
For writing or directing?
For directing.
Okay.
For directing. And it's a great experience because you have to learn how to make decks and pitch, all of these skills. Like, I have to it's all self-taught, right? Like, you didn't actually learn this stuff. And then being in the room and being able to like talk to these folks and going to generals and all this kind of stuff. Like, that's all been awesome and exciting. And then, sending them stuff that you're working on. So that's all been really great. And being exposed to all of that because of your rep, whoever your reps are, that's all fantastic. And it's been really helpful. But with Mar Vista, so when they sent the movie out to a bunch of distributors, they sent us the list, and then Mar Vista was one of them. And I have a really good friend at Mar Vista who's Hannah Pilman, who I've known as a big deal at Mar Vista, and we're really good friends. Our children are really, really close, and we've holidayed together and all of this kind of stuff. And her husband is a coworker of ours, but we've never crossed the let's work together thing. Like, we've never done it. She's always like, I'm here if you ever need me. And I'm always like, I can't breach that line. Like, we're buddies. Like, we're not doing that. But one day years ago, she told me, direct a feature and come to me. Like, I'll give you movies to direct. And I was just like, yeah, people always say that. They don't really mean it. The number of people who've told me stuff like that, and you email them and they're like, who this, So I was like, and I never wanted to breach that line with her. So we kept this world completely separate. Like, I talked about my trials and tribulations, and she would always listen with like a very patient sort of, ear. And then she would tell me about all the things they were doing. And I was like, that's cool, it was awesome. But, we were friends outside of all of this,
Sure.
And so when I heard that my team was sending Bindu to Mar Vista, I just mentioned it to her. And then we were actually going to a trip to Big Bear. And she was like, she was going to come to our premiere at Indian LA Festival, but then it all shut down because of COVID. So she said, I'm dying to see, just bring it. We'll watch it together. And I was like, okay. And then she watched it and she was just like, I don't understand. Why are you not working all the time? This is insane. We're buying this movie. And that was it. I was like, what? She's like, no, we got to make this happen. What is it? I'm going to talk to my friend. And I was like, this is like the craziest thing I've ever heard. I was just like, is this for real? She's like, I don't understand. Why are you not working all the time? This is nuts. You got to be working. I was like, okay, Hannah. So in many ways, like, I completely like attribute like all the stuff that I've done since, to her pushing and really supporting me. And, she's not just done that for me. Like, she's that kind of a person. She's given so many young directors their first shot, and she's really big on like supporting young women filmmakers. So she's awesome. So, that's a huge reason why, which is why I really always want to make Hannah proud. So when she gave me the next much bigger movie, she was like, okay, now show us what you can do next, And that's sort of how the other projects at Mar Vista have happened for me. Yeah.
Very cool. So your indie work is really your door opener.
I mean, I say this all the time. If you want to be a director, make your first feature. That's huge. I think it helps a lot. again, I don't know if it's the only way, but it definitely helped for me. For a long time I was pushing at all these doors, but then that, and then also getting representation helped because it puts you, but again, some of it is talent, some of it is, did somebody talk to someone about you,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just that, you never know. And, I've been at this for a long time. I'm not young by any means, but I'm grateful for, even the small things that are going my way once in a while.
Right. So I'm wondering about this relationship you have with them now, because you're also a writer, right? You haven't just written Bindu, you've written other things. Do you feel that you could bring a script to them that you want to direct as well?
100%. I think if I had a script that was in their wheelhouse, which I think is very important, I can definitely take it to, so it's not just Hannah. So now I've worked with other producers there. There's Larry, there's Neil, there's Marianne. There are all these people who sort of I've worked with, and I could take a project that is within like sort of what their slate of films. And I think that at least they'll at least let me pitch it,
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the things that I tend to write are still very indie.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define that?
Probably not going to make a whole lot of money.
Sure. So a little nicher?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at least that is how I define it to myself, because I like to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I tend to write things that are more like stories about people that are not often seen on screen, that are not necessarily going to capture a big talent, and gazillion dollars. Unfortunately, with Hollywood, you got to spend money to make money or lose a lot of money, but they're cool with spending a decent amount of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, even while trying to raise money, it was always very interesting to me that a lot of investors turned us down because we were raising too little.
I heard that recently.
Yeah, and I was like, isn't that good for you? Like, if we bomb, you're not going to lose that much. And they're like, there's not enough in it for us. And I was like, yay.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't understand you guys, but I guess that's what rich people do. I don't know. I don't know what this is about, but definitely an eye-opening experience. But yeah, the next film that I want, that I'm hoping we can get done it's definitely a bigger budget, but it's still a little bit more indie at heart,
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I don't know if it has necessarily a big commercial appeal, but I think it's a fun movie, and hopefully we get to make it the way we want to get to make it.
Is it something that you would go directly to investors about this time? Would you try crowdfunding again?
Yeah.
a lot of vehement head shaking on this podcast right now, which is fair. Yeah. All of us have worked in crowdfunding or have done crowdfunding, and all of us know how hard that is, especially if you want to raise more than like $10,000.
Yes.
I think everybody should crowdfund once, but I cannot do that again. I just don't have it in me. Like broke me. It broke me. And we crowded a decent amount of money. I don't know if I could ever do that again. Like ever.
Well, and I feel like diminishing returns for the bigger and bigger projects, unless you happen to have like a mega celebrity, it's probably tough to go beyond your existing budget range.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think there are certain things that we were told in film school. If you're going to make your movie, you got to have a star, and all of that stuff. So we kind of knew all that. And then we got paired up with the Duplass brothers. And then they were like, plot twist, don't get a star. Just get people who want to be in your movie, because you're making your movie for nothing. So at least get people who want to be in it. And we were like, I don't know what this means, but it's making me very confused, but we just went with it. We were lucky enough to have David Arquette come on board, and he was just a gem of a human being who really just, I think, did it out of the love of his heart. I don't know. Like we put him up in a nice place and gave him a lot of hugs, but that's about it, super nice person. He really liked the script, which I think goes a long way, and having the Duplass brothers attached,
Right.
Sure.
That opens up doors. And I think also the caliber of actors we got was because of that, It wasn't just looked at as like some random project that, oh, cool, sounds interesting, bye, People were willing to like take a risk on it. And we were lucky. I mean, Megan Suri was in our movie, she had her first big role in our movie, and look at her today.
Yeah.
She's kicking ass.
So since we're kind of talking about money, I kind of wanted to transition into like, what does it look like to get paid to like for hire directing, especially since in your cases seems like you were coming on a little late for both of the projects you've done so far. So is it like you're on contract and you get an hourly, through the end of production? Like, do you get paid for the pre-production that you did for 3 weeks? What does that even look like?
Yeah, so it's definitely a contract.
Mm-hmm.
And it is broken up from pre-production all the way through post until like you turn in your director's cut.
Okay.
I didn't have final cut in either project. I don't know. I don't think I will even in my next one, but that's okay. We'll get there slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And they pay you based on certain number of tasks completed essentially. And then in pre-production, you get like a per diem, especially if you're out of state. And then, of course, once production starts, I don't think you get a per diem. Maybe it like reduces because you get fed on set and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, these are all, I'm not a member of the DGA yet. So, and these are not movies, that are DGA films. I don't have even my points towards that yet. Although I should look at my last one. I might be working towards that. So your rates, if you're a member and it's a movie like that, is like significantly a different ballgame.
Sure.
And of course, also what you're earning is in relation to the budget of the movie,
Right.
I still have a full-time job, so I am not by any means supporting myself solely by directing yet.
Right.
But, that's the goal. You're working towards that. I don't even know what that would look like. That sounds amazing, but also probably pretty hard if you have to, especially as a director. I mean, I think, directing TV would have to supplement some significant portion of that because I think there's still some level of like, it's like in some ways, directing TV is a little more like a 9 to 5.
Right.
You're going and taking someone's vision and making sure like it's carried to the next person undisturbed while still like peppering in some of your own, elements. But directing a feature is you're putting your heart and soul in it,
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a long process. Even the 12-day movie started in early October. Mm-hmm. And I didn't finish full production. Like I do my director's cut, but then I've stayed on through the whole thing, even though technically I'm done and I just need to go to like final mix. But the producers have been kind enough to like let me hang out, and even during their final cut, have let me like interject and like make a case for not doing things, and they've all been very kind that way. And in some cases, like I've taken the movie through post-production because they're off making another movie and they're just like, yeah, go ahead, do your thing, And I'm like, cool, all right. I was like, I'm just gonna make it a musical, But it's been great to learn how to work with folks. This last movie that we did had notes from so many different partners. Like there was Mar Vista, there was Particular Crowd, there was Lionsgate when they came on board. It was like so then you had, so that was also super interesting to be like, wow, this is a lot of different opinions now all being filtered in. And then in the middle, they're like, what do you think? I'm like, which one are we talking about?
Is there a residual structure if your movies get replayed again or no?
Not for me, not right now.
Got it.
Not at this moment, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe in the future?
Who knows?
Yeah, at this point, I am very much still a working director trying to get my next job and doing that sort of thing. I'm not the director to be sought after, and I'm not there yet. So once I'm there, yeah, maybe they'll do the back end points and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I imagine once you're in the DGA, that'll probably give you some more negotiating leverage as well. Yeah.
I also don't know what happens once you're in the DGA. I mean, I know that for some actors, and I don't think it's the same, but like once they become SAG, they feel like, sometimes the kinds of jobs they get for a while, like until they can get their footing, they find that it's sometimes challenging in the beginning years. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the same. I actually know very little about the DGA because it's always just like, that's so far away, but you never know. That could happen in the next movie,
Right.
Fingers crossed. But at this point, I'm just really looking for good scripts that are backed with at least somewhat sufficient money and time, and to work with people that are just nice,
Yeah.
Which, and I say that out loud sounds like I'm asking too much. It's really the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that, because I think that's something that isn't talked about enough in this industry, and pursuing getting paid to do the thing that we all love doing, that like it's not a door opens and suddenly you're making a living and that's how you're paying your bills. I think people don't talk enough about how they're making ends meet while they're really like in the middle of that pursuit, and even when they're doing it.
It's a never-ending hustle. I don't think until you're making like, I don't know, like 60 grand an episode and you do like 2 episodes a year or something, then you're like quitting your day job, you know, and then, I don't know, doing some other cool stuff. But it takes a minute to get there, you know. I think obviously having your foot in the door and having people that are supportive of you and are giving you opportunities goes a long, long way. But I'm nowhere close to supporting myself as a director yet. I mean, that is actually my next goal, right? Is getting to that point. But I still have to do, like, you know, I'm hoping to start being able to direct TV. Like, that's the next frontier, you know, like, and that is like the hardest gig to get, you know?
Yeah.
Like getting into the labs is like one thing. And then once you go through them, to be placed in a shadow is another thing. And then from that shadow, for that to translate to a TV episode, that's like I don't know what the stats are, but it feels like 1 in a million, you know?
Sure.
And that's the hope, to move towards that. And then still continue. I mean, features will always be my first love. I also really enjoy being thrown into a movie and then pulled out of it when my services are over.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about that. We've talked a lot about the business, which I've been so appreciative of. So now I want to give you the opportunity to talk craft. So what is your approach to kind of finding your footing on a project that isn't your own? Since obviously you've worked in both projects that are very your own and projects that you sort of get thrown into at the very last minute. Like what is your starting point to say, this is mine a little bit now?
Sure. I mean, the first thing is the script. Even if the script is not amazing, there has to be things in there that I can relate to. And that, like, I read a script recently that was, I think everybody except me was really into. And it wasn't a bad script. It was well written, all of that stuff. It was like, on paper, it was all things groovy, but I could not connect to it. Like, when I closed the last page, I was like, I cannot pick any of these characters and be like, that's who that is, that's who that is, that's who that is. Like, if I can't do that, I can't direct it, you know? And then there are scripts where there are lots of areas of improvement, but like, I get it. Like, I am with this person or these people or the story or these challenges. Like, I'm here. And I think that's extremely, like, for me, with comedy, that is like an absolute must. It doesn't matter if the jokes are like, if there are some good laughs, but if I don't get the motivation of the main character, I can't not make it funny, right? Like, because in comedy, there's so much humanity. We're laughing at like, shucks, that could be me, right? And it's awkward and it's weird. And you're like, you're laughing at like, you know, all that stuff, because it's not just like funny. Like, that's there too. But like, you really have to care about the funnies, right? You know, like, all of that has to matter. I think then your laughs are bigger and it's more fun. And like, when I read a script, there are times like Christmas is Canceled, the one that I did, the last one, I got the script and I read it and I immediately was like, yeah, I want to do this one. Boy, what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? Let's do this, you know? Because it's like, the setup is super clear. Like, you get it. Like, you're like, yeah, I would be mad if this happened to me. And yes, I can see where the humor is. There's a lot of physical comedy, right? Which I'd never done before. And those kind of movies, they don't make as much movies with physical comedy anymore, right? And then, of course, like, there was the promise of like, you know, bigger cast. Like, what is that like? You know, working with Dermot Mulroney. I was like, oh my God, Dermot Mulroney? Okay, let's go talk to him. But he was wonderful, right? Like, and again, here's a person who's like, who is this person? Like, who is our director? Like, I don't know who she is. She just like walked in here and telling me what to do. But getting them on it, like Haley Ortier, Janelle Paris, all these are like really seasoned actors, you know, who just nailing it and really working with them. So it's like, yeah, you're able to do what's on the page really well. Like, you're killing it. So let's get a take of that. But now let's just go have some fun, you know, because you guys, we can have a blast because y'all are hilarious. So it's stuff like that. It really comes down to the script for me. Like, if I can relate to that and I can make it work, funny or whatever the case might be, then that's where it starts. I don't know if I'd be able to, I mean, maybe I will. I don't know if the script is terrible, but it's like millions of dollars. I don't know. Maybe if you throw enough money at something, it's kind of passable. I don't know. I mean, we all know that's not true, but that's where it starts, is the script for me. And then once I see that, and then of course pitching it to the people who are going to sign the checks and be like, are you vibing with my vision of it? Mm-hmm. And what I have found is that when I am excited, it's very obvious. I'm very animated. I'm I'm in it. And I think people see that and they're like, yeah, okay, okay, fine, just get out of here. Go make this thing, You're jazzed, we can tell, they feel comfortable that you care. And that's the thing for me. If I don't care, because I'm going to spend a lot of time, I'm going to leave my husband and my kids for weeks on end,
right?
Go off to some place and make this thing, it has to matter. Mm-hmm. It has to be something in it, has to be a worthwhile experience. Am I getting to do something I never got to do before? Is there an action sequence? Is there something here that is exciting me, that it's I can't wait to get to page 72 or whatever it is, and do this crazy thing. And that's really it. And how do you make all these things visually pop? Telling the story as visually as possible, that's also really exciting. And then collaboration, I love that. So going to finding the DP and being okay, I feel safe with you, random human, to open my brain and just let you in. Okay, now let's go and do this. That's one of my favorite relationships, is with the DP, and all of that. It's just kind of goes from there. And those are my happy places in production. Looking at stills, watching movies, talking films, looking at examples, that kind of stuff. And then the last one was really funny because they were such horror people. So I would suggest all these things and they were just what? But our DP, he was such a trooper. But again, bringing that sort of sensibility, they're all pros. They know what they're doing, so it's just fun to get to know them and, make new friends and all of that. So it really has to be worth it to go through it, because it's tough, right? It's tough. It's not anywhere in the ballpark of being financially viable. Mm-hmm. It's not terrible. The last one was not bad at all, but still a lot of hustling and doing all that stuff. If somebody gave me a movie that I was interested in tomorrow, I'd be like, peace out, I'm going, pack my bags and leave, because it's truly the best place ever, is being on set.
Yeah. So where have you found the balance between the part of your job that is I have to complete this movie someone else made and made a lot of the decisions on, and this is what interests me as a director and as a creative, and how can I make it feel a little bit more like my voice if I'm going to be working on it this long? Where is that line for you, and how have you found ways to navigate that so that it does feel a little bit more no, this is a me set. This isn't just someone else's set that I happen to be on.
Especially in a situation where it's you didn't have a say maybe in the casting, and maybe you came on board and the crew was already there and the DP wasn't your choice, maybe.
Yeah. So I haven't had so technically my last movie, the DP was already set in place. Mm-hmm. And, I was okay, for me, I have no problem bringing people on the ride. I think I can convince most people. My sets are happy places. I'm not a tyrant. I'm usually very excited all the time and super jazzed, extremely stressed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not woo-hoo. I'm oh my God, this day is never happening. I'm not the kind of director that once I'm done with the actors, I'm gone. I'm in there. I'm with the deep. I'm always in the mix. So I think my sets tend to have that sort of quality. I really want to bring everybody on the ride. I love my PAs. I always tell them, you got to do everything in your power to get into the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is the people around the actors, right? Because I tell them what's happening there is infinitely more fun than hanging out, doing all the things that lets us do what we need to do, which is making sure people are picked up, making all that good stuff that they do to keep the set running. I'm that's awesome, but you need to get in here. So as much as I can, bringing them in, making sure that they are participating and So I've been lucky enough that all the sets that I've been on are positive places, because I think that's important. It's not that it's without difficulty. There are difficult people. You have to know how to work with them. But I think for me, how to make a film my own is really in the visuals. There's no other way that I can tell a story except the way that I tell a story. So if I get it, it's going to be my voice. The visuals are going to be my way. The first movie that I did with Mar Vista, I got a note from the producer. It was 12 days. There's not a whole lot I could do about it. But they were you have a very specific point of view. I was yes, of course. That's kind of what you hired me to have. But they were you need more coverage. And I was I have 12 days. I cannot cover a scene a million different ways. I just didn't have time, you know. It was like very wordy film because of the drama, like, and, you know, they're talking and having feelings, and that was hard, you know. So the next movie, but I take things like that to heart, like, you know, because I want to make sure that we have enough in the edit to be able to tell the best story. But at the same time, I don't want to have so much in the edit that you can change the story, right?
Right.
So finding that fine line, like in this last movie, we really covered it because it's a comedy. You have to cover it. You're not going to land the joke, right? Because the joke is not just in the dialogue, it's in someone's off reaction to what's being said, right? So for that, we had to cover the heck out of it. And what I learned from that one was how much you can cut in the post and kind of be okay with it. Like this movie the movie starts with a flashback that is at least 15 minutes long with like younger cast, and we cut all of it and it still works fine. But it was shocking to me that we cut it because it was basically a comedy and it was running too long. So they're like, yeah, those kids, goodbye. And I was like, what is happening? And in my head, I was like, but how will anybody understand? And then, you know, I started watching, I showed to people who didn't know anything, and they're like, yeah, I get it. High school. Shit happens. You know, I was like, really? They're like, yeah, you get it. I'm sure. Like, I hated Jessica or something like that. And you're like, okay, whatever. And, you know, that's the thing. Audience get it. Like, and the thing with the last movie, you could do it because it was very much within that sort of like formula movie. You know, people get what that story is. You know, it's not like brand new information or something. It's just like how you get through the journey that is unique and not maybe done the exact same way. So I think, you know, those ways it helps you, but you just try to find like your way of telling the story. You know, like I also, in the last one, after I read the script and stuff, like I had a conversation with the writer, you know, many conversations, but really like making sure, like, I love my writers. I want to because I am one, and I can't imagine what it's like to like give up your words to some psychopath who just like goes to town on it, you know, like, I'm like, oh my God, that shoot feels so awkward. So it's like talking to them and just being like, this is where I'm coming from. And then they're like, she was literally like, just go do your thing. It's not required. I was like, what do you think? And she's like, yeah, okay, fine. Calm down. But she's a WGA writer. So she was on set. She was super like, woo, what's she gonna think? But she loved it. She was like, I was seeing the monitor just laughing her ass off. I was like,
so how do you define your visual voice then? The way that you uniquely tell a story? If you were to talk to someone about like, oh, this is the way that I do it, how do you define that?
I don't know how to say what is unique, but my stuff tends to be usually visual. Like in most of the movies, like there'll be some set piece in the middle that's like visual and fun. In my first movie, there was a dance number. In this last one, we had like this crazy beer Olympics, which really in the script was just a quarter page. And I was like, Beer Olympics needs to be epic. So we're going to go to town. And nobody knew what we were shooting. They're like, what is happening? It's scheduled for a whole day. And I was like, yeah, because we're going to go nuts. So everyone's like, okay, what's next? Where do we move? Where's the camera? And we were like, this is what we're doing. And we had to shoot it over 2 separate weeks because we had Dermot only for half the time. So we shot all his coverage first. And then we had to shoot all the other stuff the next week. So people were like, wait, we're back in Beer Olympics? I was like, yep, Beer Olympics. Here we go. But, you know, it turned out fine. It was really fun. I like to do stuff like that, like something that pops and is fun and visual. My writing professor from Chapman he's watched my stuff. He's awesome. He's one of my favorite teachers. And he sent me a note on Facebook. He's like, I just saw your movie. And he's like, and I was like, I'm going to quote you sometime. He's like, you have a real skill for making weird things pop. And I was like, yeah. I'll take it.
That's a cool.
That's a great slug line.
Yeah, like I make weird things pop. But yeah, I like to make it fun and visual. I think as much as I can get into the characters' heads and show the audience how they're seeing things, I think is always far more interesting to me than just like saying things. So yeah, visual stuff I would say is where, but I don't know, it's so general. I don't know how to explain it because I'm sure everybody makes their stuff be as visual as possible.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I know a lot of writers who become directors, and you can always tell if somebody was a director first or not, because director first tend to have something that's more than just what was literally on the page, whereas the writers are just like, as long as they say the dialogue right, it could be a blank white wall, we could be in a void. And I'm guilty of that, certainly, myself.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we learned, in our directing classes was, obviously show, don't tell. which I have taken to heart. And I try to show always more than tell as much as possible. Like, I think it allows the audience to connect more with like where they're coming from, more empathy and stuff. So that's, I would say, if there is a style I'm going for, that might be it.
Do you have the ability to make changes to the scripts that you're being brought on to direct? Like if you're like, ooh, I think we could show this rather than having the character say this line, like, do you have the freedom to make that call? Do you have to get approval?
100%.
Oh, great.
100%. That's been really great. Both the films that I've done for Mar Vista, they gave me a pass. And obviously the second one, because it was WGA, I could not make the changes directly until we were at the time we were shooting. So I had to work with Sarah, and she was very receptive. And obviously I told her like where I think the changes should be. And then she did the Sarah version of it, which was infinitely better. Or I was like, I really don't think this is working. And she would come up with some crazy idea. And I was like, yes, great. That's awesome. But obviously, closer to the shoot, we had to do some things because we just didn't have, we had a car scene that essentially had to do some heavy lifting in the plot, and we didn't have it anymore because it rained and we ran out of days with Dermot and we couldn't do it, and I was like, okay, that's not happening. So now we had to figure out a way to make that scene was important in the plot and had to exist. So I basically had to write something on the fly. And when she was there, like I gave her all the scenes. So I rewrote the dialogue all in one file, and I was like, bless it. And she was like, yeah, this is all great. And I was like, Sarah, what? Okay, awesome, thank you. She was just like, whatever. She was super chill by the end of it. She always was chill. I mean, it was not like there was ever a point where she wasn't. But on set, I was actually nervous when I rewrote stuff. I was like, she's gonna hate it. And she was actually super kind and gracious and was like, whatever.
Had she been through that before, maybe? Like, is this not her first rodeo?
She probably has. And we try to be as respectful. Like, we weren't just like rewriting her script. We would never do that. The only times we had to do it is when it was a crunch time and we couldn't shoot in that location and it had to still work or something. We maybe did some joke punching up and stuff. So, did that kind of a pass, trimmed some stuff. The script was a little long. We cut some pages and rearrange some things. But I would say everything was done for the film. But I've been, both the films, one of the things I do ask is like, hey, can I do a pass? And they've never been like, hell no. Absolutely not. And that's cool, because it helps, again, a way to get your voice in.
Totally.
And I'm not big on like going in and rewriting things. Like if I hated it to that point, like I'm not even getting on the project. It's just that, there might be some lines of dialogue that doesn't sound right, or maybe there's a character who's just like right now just being like throwaway and I think can be used better. So let's give them a little bit more depth, that kind of stuff. So they're not just like, oh, just, lesbian friends. Right. They're just here to answer calls. Like, no, maybe they can actually come in to be like the voice of reason and really have like an impact on the film and stuff like that.
Right.
That's
cool.
Great.
Yeah, a lot of our questions you're kind of like answering as we ask you other questions.
So
very helpful.
Do you have like any specific advice for directors who are trying to make that transition from indie to for hire, whether that be like in the interview pitching process or actually on set? Do you have any specific advice? Like what's one tip that you think will really help people?
I mean, I think, obviously make your first feature. I think that goes a long way. And then I think obviously networking goes a long way. I'm terrible at it, so I don't know. I honestly got, in some ways, like meeting Hannah, like she's just such an awesome person and we just got along as friends and we didn't cross that line of like, let's work together ever. It wasn't until the movie went there that I even like dared tell her.
How did you meet her originally? Did you go to school together or?
No, so her husband works with us at New York Film Academy.
Okay.
And we got along with him. My husband and I, like, we love Mike. He's awesome. And then he invited us over to have dinner and I met his wife and I was like, Mike, you're great, but your wife, even better. Like she's awesome, At that time, she didn't even work at Mar Vista. So, I've seen her grow and just always just been like, awesome. This is like, just a really good friend. And then our kids, we ended up having kids around the same age and then they became really good friends. And then during the pandemic, is when we really hung out a lot. We didn't see each other a whole bunch before. Like we occasionally here and there, like dinner once in a while. But when the pandemic happened, the only place we could go to was the beach. And she would bring the twins and then Cyrus and us would go. Because it was the only outdoor place to hang out. And, the kids were losing it without any social connection. And that's when we started like really like broaching these subjects. So my advice would be find a Hannah.
Put yourself in a position to meet people, just to know them and care about them. And then you never know who's going to end up at Vista.
Yeah. I mean, I think no matter what, like, I think, you know, I'm not in any position to do a lot for anybody, but I hope I will be someday where I can help people in a meaningful way. And I would love to be in that position. But there's a lot of people who will reach out to me now and be like, and there's the people who will reach out to me in a way where I'm like, yeah, I want to help you. Like, I don't know you at all, but you have asked me in a way that makes me feel like I don't mind giving you 10, 15, 30 minutes of my time. And then there's people who, even some who I know, who will ask me in a way where I'm just like, you need to work on the skill, you know, like, come on, is this really how you're going to come at me with this question? Like, knowing how to ask is also a skill.
Can you give an example of that?
I mean, there are people who will just email me and be like, hey, I met you here, or I saw you speak here, or I watched this. Here's my script. Can you give me notes? I'm like, huh? I'm like, no. I can't do that. I don't have time. Like, I really cannot just read your script and give you notes. I'm sorry, but I hope I'm like, I wish you well. Peace. Or there are people who will be like, you've made 3 features. How do I do that? Tell me. And I'm like, okay, where do I start?
Well, sure. Now you can just send them the link to the podcast episode.
Yeah, but it's also just the way I'm just like, I feel so like, am I supposed to just pick up the phone and like talk to you now? Like, I don't know who you are, or I've met you once, or there was once a guy Indian, and he was just mad at me that I wouldn't meet him for a coffee and talk about his script. I was just like, I don't know you. I cannot meet a random stranger and talk to you about your script. It's like, what do you think? You can't talk to me? Who do you think you are? And I'm like, sir, I don't know who you are. So I'm sorry.
I think I am a literal stranger. What are you talking about?
I don't know if you know about the world. It's a dangerous place. And I can't just show up to some random coffee house to meet you. I actually don't even think it was a coffee house. It was some random, I was like, please don't be mad at me, but no, block, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and no one's entitled to your time, even so.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm some big shot and I don't have time for you, but I really, really feel like it's how you ask, right? Like, it's, I want to help. I'm 100% down to doing it, but it's how you ask. Don't ask me like I've already made a mistake by not helping you, right?
This isn't a negotiation. They shouldn't be trying to manipulate you into helping them.
Yeah, and it's not even like, or there'll be people like, you know, read my script and I just watched your movie. Like, those two things are not really correlated. If you don't have to do anything for me, you know, like, I don't need that. Like, I'm happy to do it. And there are lots of people who I read the script, or I'll talk to them, or I'll send them emails, whatever they need. But it's always just interesting. So I think that's a really important skill also, is know when to ask and who to ask. Because if you've made your first feature, you have a better shot at reaching out to somebody who might be able to at least put you in the right path of going forward. But if you haven't, sometimes just with shorts, I don't know. I feel like lots of these execs don't know what to do with that. They're like, cool, that's awesome. This is really funny or interesting. But they're like, but can you tell a story? Can you handle a budget? Can you handle a crew? Can you handle days? Can you handle the pressure? And it's like, yes, you can. Obviously, I've made like 12 shorts. But somehow, like, I feel like that the ability to like string those things together doesn't always seem to happen. It's like, but this person made 12 shorts. You know how hard that is? Like, yeah, but you know, all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, and it's just like, come on, guys, that stuff is really hard. It's like, what does it take to make 12 shorts? A heck of a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my limited experience helping festivals and stuff like that recommend indie people to talk to industry, what I have learned is that industry people tend to not be very creative about like looking at something and seeing its potential versus looking at something and thinking, can I literally put this on TV right now? And I think the same sounds like it's true for length of project, where they're like, well, you've only made something 12 minutes long. How do I know I can trust you with 30 minutes? Well, I have 3 12-minute things. Yeah, but they're 12 minutes. Like there seems like you have to basically spoon feed them exactly what they're looking for, or it's hard to get them to like
100%
branch out.
100%. Even like when I'm like, you know, hey guys, I want to direct horror or a thriller, like, and they're like, no, comedy. More comedy? And I'm like, 100% comedy all the time. But I'm like, I can do a thriller. I love horror films. And they're like, we don't want to be the ones that give you that chance. Why don't you go do it on your own time? And it's like, okay.
Well, okay, so final question then, which is specifically a question to make sure that eventually Christina gets to be interviewed in this capacity because she deserves it, and I can't wait to see it. You mentioned earlier that you've had a lot of experience in like generals and putting together pitch decks and things like that. So like, what are some concrete things that like maybe have surprised you or that you've learned over the process of doing all these pitches and generals that tend to like get you started on the right foot when you're meeting a new person?
So the things that I learned about myself, one in both generals and in pitches, is that I'm not really good at like meeting new people. It's not really but weirdly enough, like I'm until the meeting is about to happen, I'm like, I just need to cancel this. Like, what is there a tsunami? What's happening? Something's got to happen, right? But then it happens and I'm just fine. Like, it's something just takes over me and it's like word salad, something comes out and they're laughing, it's over. And I'm like, oh, that was not that terrible. So that's been a surprise that I can actually keep people's attention for like an hour or 45 minutes or whatever
if you
time
let yourself be in the position instead of canceling.
I have actually never canceled, although in the beginning, I used to really be like, I cannot do this. Like, you could ask my husband, I'd be like, the day is coming, I'm like sweating, and I'm like, how is this? What am I going to say? I'm not that nervous about generals anymore because they're just human beings and they just want to get to know you. It's like being on a weird date.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk creative stuff, totally fine. I was like, why am I scared about this? This is super fine. And especially now that you don't have to drive to meet anybody and it's all on Zoom, it's even better. Like the driving in LA and parking and like sweating and hoofing it up some building or whatever, that was the worst. And you wait there and everyone's just judging you. They're like, oh, I'm like, oh, this is the worst, But now it's like, I just have to like turn on my computer and I'm like half decently dressed and like wearing sweats and it's totally cool. And they have their kid like screaming in the background. It's like very, humanizing.
A great equalizer. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's totally fine. But the thing with making pitch decks is I learned that I can figure out how to use Canva, which I was like, what is this? This is so scary. And I think what really helped me, and I'm not going to say that I love doing these because they take up so much time for me to make a pitch deck, but I've really learned how I can get my visual ideas in their brain and be like, this is where I'm going with it. And I think it helps a lot instead of just like talking in like abstract things, which I think has been really helpful. And I've had to pitch things where like I'm one of the last 3 directors and they were going to decide between one of you. So I had to do actual pitch decks and like pitch for 30 minutes in front of all these execs. And it's like, oh my God, this is scary.
So is it like screenshots of comps? Is it like you shoot something? Is it photography? Like, can you give an example of what it means to put it in their brain?
So typically it's a presentation. I now started doing like, I've learned how to put videos in and stuff. Like I learn with each one, like I get better. There are like GIFs and all this. Earlier it was more like images and text and stuff. So I've gotten better at mine. They're not like extremely wordy now and stuff. But usually there's a director's statement, there's a vision, there is a description of what I think the characters are, not just like what's in the page, but what I want them to be. Then some ideas of casting. Then I'll do like, what is my aesthetic? Color palette, what are some visual comps, not just movie, but like these are kind of like visual comps. I'll do like a collage of that. Then I'll do some casting ideas of who I think might be good choices for each of like the top like 5 or 6, depending on what kind of movie it is, but like, the top 5 or 6 characters. I'll do location ideas, like what I think the ideal locations would look like. What are some other things I do? If it's like a sequel, which I've also done, then I've had to talk about character arcs, where they started in the previous movie, where they are now, what has changed, stuff like that. It's usually like 20, 30 pages long, very visual.
I have a question about casting, because that's something I'm working on a pitch deck right now, and we have to kind of use comps for casting pages.
Yeah.
And I never know what to do with that. I'm also just not like, if somebody is good, I will just be like, yes, you're hired. I had no preconceived notions about you other than, can you say the words? Perfect. So are you like genuinely recommending cast? Are you strategically saying, look at these 5 famous, handsome people that I think we could hire for this? Like, what is your casting strategy? Or do you have like no, this is the performer for this role and also for other people?
So it's somewhere between the two, but mostly what I'm trying to do is I'm always suggesting diversity in places where it's not written as a diverse role, just to open their mind to think of this character who is probably on the page written as like a white person, be like, yeah, this person could be any other, race, and it would work just as fine. And like throwing that in for them to be like, oh yeah, because pretty much all the studios now have a diversity mandate, but they're still not putting them in the lead roles in these kind of sort of movies, right? They're like
default's still white.
Yeah, they're the best friend or whatever. But it's like, this is like my signature move. It's always like all my cast will have a whole range of races in there for each character, because it depends on, like, if you go with this actor kind of person for the lead, then this could be the mother, this could be the dad, this could be the grandpa, like that kind of thing, to show them like, here are all these amazing actors that your brain doesn't automatically probably go there, no judgment. But hey, look, they could be awesome and funny and cool and interesting and all of these things. So that's like generally my go-to with casting. It's like, there'll always be the obvious choice, right? Like, you read this and you're like, yeah, this is the it actor right now in this age group who's not blown up to the point that she's unaffordable, but is a good actor, is like in all the interesting things, maybe has never really been the lead yet, that sort of thing, but could really step up and would be interested in doing a project like this, right? That would be one person. And then same sort of applying that same concept, but looking at all our amazing diverse pool of actors out there and being like, okay, look at this person would be amazing. And I think that's always been well received. I don't know if maybe everybody's doing that, but like, that's always been my thing. So I jam pack my casting suggestions, because even if they don't do it with me, like, I want to have at least left that thought in their mind, and be like, oh yeah, we didn't think of that person, but that could have been interesting. The other thing that I also include in my decks are music.
Oh, interesting.
I love music. I write with music for each film. Like, I will create a playlist. Even as director, like, I create a playlist because that's what I send to the editor for temp music until we can like find a composer or whatever we end up doing with the film. So I also put music in there because I think music also really gets to the heart of like the tone of the film quickly for people who basically it's anything I can do to help executives see the movie through my eyes in the quickest possible way as possible. And they need visuals, they need, what makes financial sense, anything that can be sound, music, and they can like see the film. That's what they go for, So I spent a lot of time like scouring the internet for images and all that kind of stuff, and then futzing with like the layout and all that,
sure,
that it's not overwhelming or it's not too much, and it's like really the right balance, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, just stuff like that. And I have a lot of fun doing them,
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it helps me because then to get the movie, you just like turn that over to your team and be like, so this is what I did 6 months ago. So how do we make this better?
Yeah.
Where are we today? And I think that's also been helpful. And even in movies where I've been hired, but I didn't pitch in this particular way, I've done boards after. I've worked with the production designer because in the last one, I had to pitch to a particular crowd and Mar Vista, once I got hired on the project, what my vision was for wardrobe, for production design, visual design, all of that. So we had to create presentations and pitch to them so that they felt like we were on the same page.
Sure.
So that was also really a different way of going about it. But then I was doing it as a team, right? So
sure,
I would like tee it up and then these guys would come and like knock it out of the park. And then we would all be like, teamwork.
For your director's statement, what do you tend to focus on that seems to be successful? Because I know personal statements are the bane of most artists. It's like, how do I distill into a paragraph?
Oh, I hate personal statements.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at personal statements. Also because they want you to tell your entire life story in like 37 words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what do I tell you? I can't tell you anything, but okay. And I'm also very wordy, as you can tell. I haven't let you guys talk at all. And I apologize.
We're both the same way.
Yeah, don't worry. We have people hear us plenty. This is not why they listen to this episode.
I'm sorry,
so
y'all.
what is, given that, because I think all three of us are mouthy broads who have lots of things to say. What tends to be your entry point for those sorts of like really concise statements of purpose? Director
statements for me is always what connected me to the script.
Okay.
If it is the problem of the main character, how do I relate to that problem? I'm not always like a hot 20-something-year-old finding my way in the world.
Sure.
But I was a less hot 20-something-year-old sometime, right? And I try to like channel that and be like, what does that feel like? And how can I bring that angst and pain and guts and glory into telling this girl's story, and what is, how do I relate to her trials and tribulations, and what did it make me feel? And why do I want her to succeed? Or what do I want her to learn? That's really where I go with it. Because I feel like that's, for me personally, like that's the story I want to tell, right? Is that's the hook that connects me to this person. It's always the main character, always, right? And you want to find an inroad to making them feel as like human as possible, even if maybe they're shitty or whatever. And what is that? That's what I like. And like, that's what I relate to. And that's what I want to make this film heart.
I love that.
I try to explain that to the people who read it.
So it's almost like you're associating yourself with the lead character, so that when they think of them, they're also thinking, oh yeah, and that director made a point to connect it to her life, and so it's almost like, well, now it's one and the same. They can't not hire.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, if I can't relate to it, it's not me by any means. None of the, like, at all. It's not me. But if I can't relate to it, I cannot tell that story. Right? It's hard for me to tell a story about a person that I have no connection to. It's like that I'm just directing some words on a page.
And that's not why you decided to be a director.
No, and for me, yeah. And I really want to find an inroad into the person, because then my goal is I can understand what is the fundamental problem here in their life. And what is the journey to fix it? Like, how are we going to get better or worse? I don't know, but we're going to go on a journey and it's going to happen. And for me, I feel like, and I know a lot of directors don't do this, and sometimes it's not advisable, but I'm also very honest when I work with my actors. I share things of my personal life. I'm not just like, tell me everything, like I'm not that person. Like, I want them to feel safe that I am in it with you. Like, I'm going to tell you some scars of my life in high school and dating and how garbage that was. Like, maybe there's something there that you connect to, and then now we can connect as human beings, because I'm asking you to share something of you as a human for me. And I want you to feel that I am giving you something back, right? And it's not like, oh, I'll tell you something and it's not like that. It's like, I am opening myself to be like, this is a safe space. I'm going to share things so that I can explain to you as the actor why I connect with your character, why I feel your character is doing this or this, and not that, right?
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, and that they can also arrive at conclusions, right? Like, because with like directing in a short time, I block the scenes ever before I talk to the actors, right? I already know what the blocking is because I know my location. I know how it's going to be. I've already done my shot list with my DP, but at the same time, I will never on set tell my actor, I want you to go from there, and then there. Like, I'm not going to tell them that. Like, I'm like, how do I incept my actor that they eventually find themselves from there and end up here, right? Like, what can I do in this space during rehearsal or during my excessive yammering that convinces them that the right thing for you to do is to go from there, pick that up, and go here. You're going to come up on that on your own. I'm just going to like incept it in your brain now.
And if you have the same motivations in mind, that hopefully is not as hard of a uphill battle as
I think
a lot of indie people find.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll do something that is totally different and it'll surprise me. And then I have to go and like tell the DP, is like, remember that thing that you did where you spent 6 hours rigging that light? That's just not going to be there. It's just not going to be there. And he's like, what? I'm like, you just watch it. You're going to get it. And you're going to be like, yeah, that's better. And they'll watch it like, okay. And I'm like, and it's like, and they'll just be like, don't do it again. And I'm like, it's going to happen, buddy. But you have to be flexible and open. And sometimes it's hard and they hate you. But, when they see it, they're like, okay, you get it. It has to feel organic. It has to feel like it makes sense. That's sort of my way of approaching all of that stuff.
Yeah, this has been so helpful. Thank you for sharing so much of that information.
Yeah, we really appreciate your vulnerability, your transparency, and how much you talk. It has been lovely. I love being able to just pass it over to you, and
yes, absolutely.
We knew we were in good hands instantly.
Yeah, and our listeners will really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to me and I'm happy to like answer it or anything. But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's cool to connect with Christina since our, movie and like, on what is it? Twitter and stuff, and it's great to finally meet you as well, Bree. So thank you.
Yeah, you too. It's been really fun.
Before we completely wrap up, where can people watch your films?
Great. So Miseducation of Bindu and the last one, The Christmas is Cancelled, is on Amazon Prime. And I think Bindu is on all things. You can, it's also on TV if you have cable still. It still plays on Fuse, and it's super fascinating to like be switching channels and see your movie, and you're like, what? And it'll still be on TV, I think, until the end of this month or next month, but it's available everywhere, iTunes, wherever you get stuff. And then Christmas Castle is only on Amazon Prime. And I don't think the Lifetime movie you can see unless you have the app anymore. It premiered on TV. Okay. And then I have no idea how to tell people to watch that after that.
I think it's the app, and I think as long as you have it with because my mom and I downloaded the Lifetime channel for Christmas because we're that kind of family. And you do have to have like we have Dish, and so you have to have a provider that offers it, but the actual app itself is free. So if any of you have that, if your parents have that, then get on it.
If you want to see a medical drama about with a lot of tears that may or may not have a happy ending, check it out. It's called Fighting for Her Family, and it's on possibly the Lifetime app.
I think so. They have a pretty big library. It would be wild if they just didn't have that one. So seek and you shall find, everyone.
Thanks so much to Kelsey Rauber for our theme music, Kaylee Brown for our podcast art, Ezra Lee for editing this episode, and to all of you for listening. Links to learn more about them and our guest are in our episode description.
And thank you to our Booby VIPs, who are our $10 supporters on Patreon, including Kim Garland, Amanda Blunt, Anthony Epp, Kelsey Rauber, Norman Steinberg, Jerry Maravilla, and Brandy Nicole Payne. If you want your name on that list and or to have access to our bonus resources related to each and every episode, you can subscribe for as little as $3 to our Patreon at patreon.com/breakingoutpod.
Or join our free newsletter where we share a new creative prompt each month. And next episode, we'll be discussing staffing for TV from outside of LA with special guest Kira Jones. Be sure to tune in.